Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel, and in today's video we'll be painting this beautiful Christmas inspired illustration. So let's dive right in. Alright, so let's start by first doing a sketch, and I just thought that we need the sketch here because it's more like an illustration, and I thought that things needed to be a bit more accurate here, especially the shape of the candles, and we're also going to be painting pine cones, so which is why I thought that doing an initial sketch would be nice. And also I know that pine cones can be a little tricky for most of you, so I'm trying to kind of show you how I sketched the pine cones. So here's how I draw the pine cones. I first start with an oval shape, and then just how you draw a flower, I add petals to it. So in this case I'm drawing the scales that curve slightly along the shape of the oval, and then I keep layering more scales right beneath the previous ones, and so forth. So just making sure that the scales in the center is the biggest, and then kind of tapers as we go downwards. Next step is I'm also adding a few berries, and I'll also draw in the flame of the candle. With a kneaded eraser, lighten those pencil marks so that you get a nice clean look and your pencil marks wouldn't show through the paint. I start by painting the candles first, and for that I'm using a very diluted shade of sepia and mixed in a tad bit of blue. You can use any blue. I'm using a bit of cobalt blue here, and just make sure that it's very diluted because this is our first layer, and since I'm painting white candles, so I'm kind of trying to keep the color very light as possible. Next up, to paint the pine cones, I'm using a very light diluted wash of burnt sienna, and that is of course my first layer. Now while my pine cones were drying, I moved on to painting some berries, and for the berries I'm using here a mix of crimson and permanent rose, but I'm also making sure that I leave a tiny white space there which represents my highlight area, and I really love how the berries look when I leave that white space there instead of just painting them opaque. Alright, so let's add some details to the pine cones, and for that, now the first one here is facing front, so it sort of looks like a layered flower with smaller petals in the center and larger petals in the outside. Just the same way you can also paint the scales of the pine cone. But also I'm making sure that I'm leaving a bit of that lighter burnt sienna shade, which is the first layer. I'm leaving a little bit space there between all the layers, so that way it's kind of creating this beautiful pine cone shape. And the second one here is facing sideways. So what I'm doing is where I'm kind of trying to take out the inside area of those layers, so typically where the area which is closer to the center, the core of the cone, that's where I'm adding the shadows and then blending it outwards slightly, so it's creating a gradient and hence keeping some areas lighter and some areas darker, so it's really capturing the whole shape of the cones in a bit of an effortless way, I would say. And again, to add the second layer for the pine cones, I'm using Vandyke Brown shade here, also mixed with a bit of burnt sienna there, to create a bit more of a darker shade. Next up, let's paint the pine needles, and for that I'm using Sap Green. You can use any green. I think I mixed a bit of olive as well, and with my number 8 silver black velvet brush, basically any pointed brush, anything, any brush with a nice fine tip, you'll be able to create these fine, nice, sharp needle-like lines which will represent your pine needles, of course. Also the paint, the color, if you notice that I'm keeping it a bit diluted for the first layer, and when I go over it again with another layer, this time I'm using a bit of a darker shade, so probably mixed in a little bit of blue there with my sap green. I think painting the pine needles were kind of like the most satisfying part of this painting, because I really enjoyed the process of creating those beautiful straight lines for some reason. And even though I didn't get, of course, all the lines, I didn't want them to be too straight as well. I kind of kept it some places a bit curvy, a bit rounded, and some places were a little bit straight. I'm also attaching the berries with a stem, and again, wherever I feel that there's some space, I'm adding pine needles to kind of balance out the whole composition. Now, if you feel that you're not very great at painting straight lines with a brush, or you've not done this before with watercolors, then I do suggest that take a piece of scrap paper and practice painting these straight lines on a piece of paper, and then go ahead and add them to your painting. Alright, next the fun part is I'm adding a little bit of shadow there towards the berry, towards the lower side of my painting. And that kind of gave it a bit of a three-dimensional look, and I really liked it because I felt that it was looking a bit empty there, and I think adding that little bit of shadow kind of made things a bit more interesting. Alright, we're almost towards the end of the painting, and the final step was to add the flame of the candle. And for that, I first pre-wet the paper with plain water, and then just went ahead and added some permanent yellow to represent my fire flame, and also let it kind of bleed out because that gave a nice glowy effect of the candle. And finally, I'm adding some final touches to this painting with some green, and also added some berries here and there. Also made sure that I kind of lifted some of that yellow towards the bottom area of the flame to give it a bit more realistic feel, and also adding a bit of shadow here towards the left hand side of the candle. So this video was actually requested by my Instagram followers because I recently posted a reel with this same painting, and so many of you commented saying that you wanted the full video. So I thought, why not? And I hope you enjoyed this video today, and I want to dedicate this video to all my Instagram followers, and those of you who are here on YouTube. If you still haven't followed me on my Instagram account, do check it out. It's linked in my description. Do follow me over there, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you again for watching. Also, let me know guys if you would like to see more holiday inspired videos or tutorials, and I'll see you soon again. Take care.